This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
You guys have been great so far. We're going to get to all your questions, your comments. Drop some more in the chat if you've got them. David brought up a question I want to get to coming up in just a little bit. But I want to go back to what we were talking about with Jimmy Butler. The other night, and I actually tweeted this, and I took it down because someone mentioned the shoulder injury. But I said, what is Jimmy Butler doing? And there was a point, it was specifically, there was a play where he was in the lane, Ira, and he had, it was like a wide open 5-foot shot. And he goes up to shoot. Nobody even jumps with him. And he like looks and then just drops it off. I think it was to Bam. And yeah, this was not the play where they were throwing, where Kyle Lowry threw an errant pass. It was just one of those where it was like, man, why aren't you taking that? Why aren't you shooting that shot? And you're Jimmy Butler, man. You're this team's closer. You have to be the one that's taking those shots down the stretch. And we've talked about this before. Like, that's what Spo wants you to do. Spo he's not even bothering to come up with the great out of timeout plays down the stretch. He's just give you the ball and let you have to be making those plays. Now, to his credit, he did come up with the big shot later on. But I ask you this, on that particular play, was there something in your head that was like, man, that didn't look right? Is that shoulder kind of playing into this, or is this just a matter of, man, Jimmy Butler's got to be Jimmy Butler in those moments and be the guy to take the big shot and be more aggressive and not defer?
You know, I actually remember that play. I think it was like a 4-on-2 or something. They had numbers. It was an easy finish. And they kept pass. And while you admire the ball movement, they came up empty on the possession. I believe the Nets then went the other way and hit a three. I just remember it was an absolute crap show of a possession. So I'm not so sure that an injury at that point blank, I think it's more of a mindset. I think Jimmy so wants to show that he's a team player that he would rather the SportsCenter highlight show the nifty little dump pass to the follow. He gets the assist anyway. He builds that triple-double resume. He'd have done that a little bit too much. As a matter of fact, people even ask me, what's the difference between all these, great starts and these blown leads late? Because the Heat play globetrotter basketball at the start and through the first three quarters, and then the game's slow, which is what it's going to be like in the playoffs. And I wrote this in the Sun Sentinel today. They have to get their fourth quarter game down because that first quarter game ain't going to play in the playoffs when you're fully scouted and reported, when teams have days between games that they can go back to the game plan and readjust and go to the game tape. So, it was a really curious play. Jimmy's not an excuse maker, and he's played on the bad ankle and, and with the soreness before. I think that was just trying to do too much to show, hey, we're the Miami Heat and we do things differently here. Because, again, he finished the game. He went on there. There was no going over. There was no, timeout that he had to see Jay Sable, the trainer. So I didn't really notice that as, hey, like with Tyler Hero or something, it's an injury moment at hand. And after the game, if you remember, Tyler Hero spoke to Kristen Hewitt on the Bally Sports Sun postgame interview. And he said it was great to be back, but he still didn't feel 100%. And to me, that's a red flag to the front office. And they're saying, wait a minute. We only have 2 games left, tonight against Dallas, FTX Arena, Thursday in Charlotte before the week-long All-Star break. We have a great chance to get anyone fully healthy here, whether it's Tyler Hero, whether it's Jimmy Butler, whether it's Caleb Martin with that Achilles. So I could see a scenario where Jimmy sits out the next 2, just like Zach LaVine is with the Bulls, goes to All-Star because it's not real basketball. And if I remember correctly, the last time Jimmy and Bam were in the All-Star game, I think Jimmy played very minimal minutes. He basically I don't need to do this. I just want to have it on my resume, want to do the interviews, want to get the endorsements and like that. So we could see a scenario across the league where guys are slowing it down. Giannis Antetokounmpo didn't play yesterday in the Bucks' loss to the Portland Trailblazers. Well, Giannis Antetokounmpo, captain of Team Giannis, playing with his brothers in the Skills Challenge, will be at the All-Star weekend. That's not basketball. That's going to the beach in Cleveland. That's just different there. So I think we could see, it'll be curious to see who actually rolls out on the court for the Heat these next 2 games. And if there is a real shoulder injury, would not surprise me to see 2 things. Jimmy sit out these next 2, go to Chicago in a nominal role, and get that whole Monday through Thursday off before they play that Friday night game in New York.
Now, and this is not saying that these next 2 games aren't important, because I think you want to go to the All-Star break with that number 1 seed. You want to be looking down on the rest of the Eastern Conference standings.
Absolutely.
But the most important thing is making sure these guys are healthy. And so
Yes.
you're right. Like with what you're saying, I think people need to not like freak out if guys sit out real basketball where they're going to be
Correct.
taking a pounding. And man, you're going up against guys in the post that are going to be, hey, if you're Tyler Hero and you're trying to get in the lane, you can bang knees with somebody. Like that's not the type of stuff. That's the type of stuff where you can get hurt. Chances are in the All-Star game when nobody's playing any defense, you're going to be okay. So
Unless you get an angry Dwayne Wade after an on-call against Kobe Bryant, that'll break your nose, but that's the exception.
Yeah, and so I can understand that. I'll say this, though. If Jimmy Butler, if the shoulder injury had nothing to do with what happened down the stretch, and this is why I wanted to ask you this question, I need to see this team play better offensively in crunch time. And I think you actually wrote about this, and it was like, I feel like I'm actually getting smarter because when I'm thinking something that I see you write, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'm actually starting to understand basketball better. But they're a problem offensive. Like there are issues offensively at the end of games. And I think what you said is the most important part of this. Like they can jump out to 15, 20-point leads when it's early in games and they're playing Globetrotter basketball. But when you get down to when the game is going to be like when we get to playoff time and you can't score consistently, that's an issue. Now, the good thing for this team is you saw them at crunch time, the defense, which is the identity of this team, PJ Tucker and Kyle Lowry swarming Kyrie Irving and the Nets on that final play. So, like, I think you're confident, especially if and when they get Victor Oladipo back, that defensively they can get down and get that stop even against the best of the best when it matters. But you got to score the buckets to get the lead first. So I need to see some better stuff with this team down the stretch late in games. And
like the player said, there were some mindless passes at the end of the game.
Yeah, it was bad.
Kyle Lowry throwing that attempted hit-ahead pass to Jimmy Butler when he posts up and just catches the ball. You don't need that. Burn clock, run seconds off of there. I like what Eric Spoelstra said after the game. I like what PJ Tucker said. We'll learn from this. Better to learn in February than have to learn late April, May, and June. So hopefully the lessons are hitting home. Obviously, these guys are stubborn because it keeps happening. But eventually, hopefully, you hit them in the head enough times, they'll realize they got to change things.
And see, that's my problem, Ira. And look, the greatest players of all time are all stubborn. I mean, there's a mindset that goes along. There's a reason why they're great, and it's because they put out the work, and they can look at all of us idiots and say, look, I know a lot more about this game than you do. I put a lot more time into it than you do. And I understand that. But this is a recurring theme. And look, we all remember what Jimmy Butler did in the bubble to go to the NBA final. I need to see him play better offensively late in games. I need to see him not settling for jump shots. I need to see him not ever take a three-pointer ever again in the fourth quarter. I never want to see it. I want to see him driving to the basket and getting fouled, getting contact. And I get it, man. It's February, but I just don't feel like this is a switch that you can flip on when we get to the playoffs. I need to start seeing it now. And you're right. You need to learn, and this is the time to learn, but I need to see the fruits of that learning eventually before it actually starts to matter.
And the one thing I will say is this. Coaches are smart. And we see this in football also. Eric Spoelstra is not opening the secret playoff binder of when in trouble, go to play X. So I think part of this also is Eric's not showing his hand. He's not running the end around. He's not running the halfback pass. He's saving that for the Super Bowl when he has to run that kind of play. So I think it's a matter of also there will be a playoff style. The NBA will be off from Sunday to the following Saturday, the week before the playoffs, unless you're in the play-in, which I think we all agree the Heat will finish top 6 or better. There will be time for playoff boot camp. There will be time for, okay, guys, those binders we gave you in September, put them aside. Here's the book. Here's what we do. The situation we were in against the Nets, we ran X, Y, and Z. But now we're running alpha, beta, gamma. This is our playoff book. This is our opening case of emergency. So I think there's also part of that, just like Eric not rushing and back certain players. The other part of that is defensively also at the end against the Nets when you needed to stop. When Caleb Martin's available, he was out because of the Achilles in that game. That's someone else you have in there. It's easier to play offense, defense when you have a Caleb Martin. So again, not the full closing package. Closing Heat in February is going to be a lot different from closing Heat April, May, and June. There's another level. Eric's going to get there when he has to. When you're sitting in first place, you don't have to get there right now.
And putting a bow on this, Dola says driving to the basket is when Jimmy gets hurt. And I understand that. I think that's why I'm saying do that late in games. Like, I don't need him pounding into guys with 7 minutes left in the first quarter against Charlotte in February. But, man, when you're getting to the last 2 minutes of a game and you need that win, I need to see him attacking. And by the way, that's where we've seen him successful. Man, the famous the photo of a champion before he's a champion that Eric Spoelstra talked about when he was exhausted. He's sitting there like hunched over. What I think people think looking back at that photo, it was after a made shot. No, he drove to the basket and he got fouled. Right. And he actually ended up going to the free throw. So, like, that's where he's at his best. And maybe you're right. Maybe looking back at that, we'll see that Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. You're right, Cito. He does get hurt at times doing that. Not necessarily injured, but gets banged up. In the last 2 minutes of games, that's when you want to save those attacking moments for that. David brought this up in the last segment. I want to ask you this, back to Victor Oladipo. How much time do you think that he needs with this team in order to get that chemistry going, for him to feel right with them and for them to feel right with him?
I mentioned this in my Ask Ira at sunsettle.com today. I don't think it'll necessarily be game time. I think it'll be practice time. I think it'll be running through the full package in practice against them when they know what they're doing. So honestly, I would say 2, 3, 4, 5 games. That's it. Because again, the NBA, once they added the play-in round, they added what used to be the case way back in the day when Pat Riley was coaching the Knicks and early with the Heat, that week off before the playoffs start. So now you can tell your team, okay, we have a game in Orlando that Sunday, April 10th. We'll be home by midnight after that. Take Monday off. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we are going to have a playoff camp. The Heat, Pat Riley, when he was in New York, used to go to Charleston and actually have an away-from-home camp. The Heat at times used to go up to Palm Beach County, take a hotel, and really make it a playoff camp. You'll have all that time. That's when they could break it down. The 14 minutes that Victor Oladipo might play in a game in early April are not nearly as important as what happens in the different groupings, where Eric can see during practice, hey, Vic works good with him, but doesn't work good with him. Hey, in this situation, Caleb is still the better defensive closer, and Tyler's the better offensive closer. But if I go into the last 2 minutes without a timeout, and I can't keep going offense, defense, Vic is the best answer. Sort of mix and match, and that's what they're going to have. Which sort of takes us back to even like with Goran. We're trying to figure who fits in. But if we have the 5-man starting lineup that I mentioned, that we talk about, again, the Adebayo, Tucker, Robinson, Butler, Lowry, we know that Tyler Hero is going to play as a 6-man. Pretty sure right now, all due respect to Omar Yurtseven, that Dwayne Dedmon's going to play as a 7th man. Sure is a lot of confidence in Caleb Martin as an 8th man. You're almost sitting there going, who fits better as a 9th man? And a 9th man is not going to be one of your leading scorers. He's going to be a situational player. And if Max Strus is hitting his threes, you might not be the 9th man in that alignment also. And I'm probably missing someone here. Gabe Vincent, which shows you how deep you go. Yeah. It's going to be all about fit. If you're asking me this, Ira, is Victor Oladipo going to come back and play 38 minutes, starting time this season? I do not see that at all at any point going forward, unless there are massive injuries or there's the next variant of COVID.
And I'm glad you mentioned Goran, because Kane's asked this question in the chat about Goran. He's just joining. And so going back to the Goran discussion, just really quickly to recap what we said earlier, the issue you're having is kind of what Ira just said. It's where's that fit? And I think with having Tyler Hero as your first guy off the bench, a guy who is a microwave scorer, not a very good defender, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense with that bench unit to add a Goran Dragic to that mix. Now, if Tyler Hero, if this knee injury becomes some sort of an issue, and again, at this point, there's nothing to make you think it's any more than a flare-up, but that's the type of role, like if you were to slide Goran Dragic into any role on this team coming off the bench, it would be Tyler Hero's role, because Goran Dragic is not as much of a complement to Tyler Hero as a Victor Oladipo
unless Goran is totally willing and says, you know what? I know I might not play, but Miami's really nice here. I have my home. I have my friends. I have some family. So maybe it's that. Maybe Goran just says, you know what? I understand that he was about sacrifice when I was here, and I understand if I come back, it'll be the same. It's really a matter of what Goran wants. You'd almost want the Heat, if he's interested, to talk to him and saying, hey, just wait. Matter of fact, not even that. You'd want the Heat to say to Goran Dragic this: I need you to listen to the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show with Ira Winderman and Clay Ferraro. What they said, are you willing to work within those parameters? So it's going to be a simple hour. He can even go out and get a home security camera while he's doing that, and then he'll have a better idea. It's pretty much laid out what the role here will be. Goran knows that. I think it's his willingness as much as anything. Do you want to slot into this role, or the Bucks role, or the Bulls role, or the Lakers role, or the Warriors role? But there certainly will be opportunity for him out there, maybe even the Celtics.
Yeah, and it's not that he couldn't help this team. It's not that they don't love him and wouldn't love him to be around the team. It's where do you play him, and who do you play him with, and can you be that much of a liability defensively in the backcourt?
Well, I'll give you one more, Clay. What about the Nets? What about end of games when you need a shooter and you can't put Ben Simmons out there? You can bring Goran in. He'll shoot. He'll launch him up. That's another possibility there. So really, the world is Goran's oyster right now.
And it's interesting you say that, because after the break, I want to talk about all these moves around the league. It's funny, like, we've been able to spend 40 minutes. We've even talked about the James Harden for Ben Simmons trade and kind of how that all shakes down. But the fact you mentioned Goran, the Brooklyn situation is really interesting, because the Heat are one of the few teams that, even if they put Goran Dragic on the floor, along with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, He's one of the few teams that could match up defensively with that, and they still can. That's the type of thing that you're looking at going down the stretch here is, how do the Heat match up with a James Harden Philadelphia 76ers? How do they match up with a Ben Simmons Brooklyn Nets? So all that to get to next. How do the Heat fit among the contenders? We're going to get to that and a lot more coming up next right here on Inside the Paint.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.